All right, my English teacher friends, Kristian Kuhn coming at you again, affectionately known as the Bob Ross at composition. And hey, teachers of rhetorical analysis, if you want to ensure that your kids get the thesis point in their introductory paragraphs, sit tight because I got an exercise for you that works really well. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do. It's called Kristian Kuhn, the Bob Ross at composition. Sprinkle a little love, leave some comments, and tell your friends and your colleagues and your students about this so that you can help me beat that pesky algorithm. So here's the letter that my students used to construct their introductory paragraphs. And as you can see here, I like to use very small text just for these bell ringer exercises and these practice exercises. So it's a letter written by Siegfried Wolf to Franz Kafka. I'll read it and then I'll show you some discussion questions that I gave my students to unpack the text prior to their writing of the introductory paragraph. So it says, "Dear Sir, you've made me unhappy. I bought your metamorphosis as a gift for my cousin, but she doesn't know what to make of the story. My cousin gave it to her mother, who doesn't know what to make of it either. Her mother gave the book to my other cousin, and she doesn't know what to make of it either. Now they have written to me. They want me to explain the story to them because I'm the one with a doctorate in the family. But I am baffled. Sir, I've spent months in the trenches fighting the Russians without flinching, but if my reputation among my cousins went to hell, I would not be able to bear it. Only you can help me. You have to, because you are the one who landed me in this situation. So please tell me what my cousin ought to make of the metamorphosis. Yours sincerely, Dr. Siegfried Wolf." All right, so here were some of the jumpstart questions. The first sentence is a standalone paragraph. Great observation. So what? Rhetorically, what impact does this have on the work as a whole? Second one, Wolf primarily incorporates the short, simple declarative sentence. Syntactically, how does this create meaning in the work as a whole? So syntactically, pretty much the whole thing's written in independent clauses and short, simple declarative sentences, which yields a certain tone that I want my students to get to. Wolf creates a juxtaposition between fighting and war and the salvaging of his reputation. Analyze and interpret this rhetorical strategy. And what is the importance, effect, and purpose of the exclamatory sentence? Right, that's an observation I wanted them to make. As the letter progresses, Wolf furthers his emotional appeal, so the pathos. Why is the employment of pathos important to the piece as a whole? And is it an effective strategy? So those are sort of the things that I wanted them to note. One term I had to teach in this was, and I'll go back a slide here. In the opening paragraph, you'll see that 3 consecutive sentences end with what to make of it either. And students are familiar with anaphora when you have repetition at the beginning of the sentence, but they did not have the term yet for the end of the sentence. So I had to teach that. It's pretty small. I don't think many students incorporated it into their thesis because it's such a bit part, but it was one term that they did not know. So you might need to teach that. So in order to get my students to write at the caliber that you're going to see in just a second, I Bob Ross my instruction a lot so far this year. So at the time of recording this, we're at the end of January. I'm in New York State, so I've had my kids since the day after Labor Day. And what I mean by Bob Rossing my instruction is that I get to the proverbial, and I'm going to use air quotes here, canvas and easel, and I paint with and for my students. So I've demonstrated for them countless times how to manipulate my heuristics when we craft body paragraphs and introductory paragraphs. So real quickly here, if we go back to the ages of antiquity when the College Board first created the AP language exam and look at prompts for rhetorical analysis, implicit in every single prompt are 2 questions. What is the author's intent and how does the author construct meaning? We use these 2 questions as the basis of our introductory paragraph. We respond to both of those questions. So we do something called the declarative thesis heuristic, and 3 sentences of the 4 sentences for the introductory paragraph are going to respond to the question, how does the author construct meaning? And that's where the kids either want to implicitly or explicitly lay down the terms, devices, techniques that are most manifest in the text. And then the last sentence is, what is the author's intent? Some teachers refer to that as the universal truth, the exigence, the universal theme. So however you want to phrase that for your students is fine. I also want to see a fair amount of tier 2 level vocabulary because it is an academic paper. And by tier 2, I simply mean your average run-of-the-mill SAT level caliber words. I run extensive word study academies in my classroom. So by the end of January, my students can wield some pretty decent words. They've definitely augmented their vocabulary if they've given me an iota of attention. And then I also run nuance academies in which we study Strunk and White's manual, Write It Right. And they have something called rule number 18 that espouses the idea that there's 12 sentence types that can be patterned 20 different ways. So in order to achieve voice, rhythm, and flow, which is very hard in rhetorical analysis, so oftentimes kids write these very stilted, truncated sentences because they don't have an ease and an alacrity yet. They over-rely on independent clauses and yield that ... kind of rhythm and flow. And I want to prevent them from doing that. So I asked them to bust out some different sentence constructs to help with that voice, rhythm, and flow. So here's the first student example. And just for context, I'll tell you what I did. So ultimately, I wanted them to write these introductions in about 5 minutes. And for this exercise, I gave them 9 minutes. So we read the passage 3 times together as a class. I read it the first time aloud. They read it silently themselves, and then I read it again for the 3rd time. We looked at those questions that I started the presentation with. And then I had them write. I set the timer for 9 minutes and they wrote. So I'm going to show you 3 exemplars that were done pretty well in terms of manipulating the declarative thesis heuristic. I'll read this from top to bottom and then I'll unpack it for you. Personally affronted, Wolf pleads with Kafka in a desperate attempt to save face. Over-relying on the short, simple declarative sentence, the author spells out his fervent request in an if-then argument. Resting on the laurels of having obtained a doctorate degree, Wolf insists that he too is confounded by the absurdity of Kafka's prose. Without an immediate disclosure of the text's hidden meaning, Wolf contends that he is nothing more and nothing less than a person of ridicule in his family. So that last sentence, let's start there. That's the author's intent, right? This is why Wolf wrote that. He's basically pleading to Kafka and saying, hey, man, I'm going to be ridiculed if you don't divulge the secret of the enigmatic nature of metamorphosis. Like, why did you write this so cryptically? Please just tell me what it's about. The first 3 sentences lay down terms, devices, techniques, either implicitly or explicitly. So that first sentence kind of gets to the ethos and the tone. The second sentence is dealing with the syntactical arrangements, but also the fact that the first 3 paragraphs are written syllogistically, and that's what the student means by the if-then argument. That's the logos, right? The third sentence gets into more of the ethos, right? So those are the 3 things that this student is focusing on and contending as being the most salient, germane terms of the piece. And this student is correct. You can see here that the sentence constructs are all varied. One of the things I ask my students to do is look at sentence 1 and make sentence 2 different from 1. Then go on to sentence 3 and make 3 different than 2 and 4 different than 3. It's kind of a training wheel way to ensure that they are making an attempt to achieve that nice, supple voice, rhythm, and flow that we want. So one of the things that I talk to my students about is the art of implication. I like a nice teeter-totter balance between explicit and implicit. I find those ones that are 100% explicit to be a little too dutiful. And, good writers typically have a teeter-totter balance of the implicit and the explicit, as you saw in exemplar number 1. So let's paint one more. Again, we're shooting for that 3 plus 1. I'll read it from top to bottom and then unpack it. Blunt and self-effacing, Woolf spells out his desperate plea for Kafka to disclose the secret meaning of his seminal text. Principally written with independent clauses, the author delineates what is at stake: his reputation as being the most informed and educated member of his family. Juxtaposing his time in war to this grim possibility, Woolf syllogistically makes an impassioned entreaty for Kafka to break his silence. Falling short of spilling the beans, Woolf is compromised should Kafka not open up. And one of the things that I talk about that is a little different between number 2 and number 1 is that students can use a little bit of colloquial or vernacular in their piece, and I encourage them to because it yields personality. I really like spill the beans and open up. So it lets me know that this kid is not being overly pedantic and they're not forcing their hands, right? It has a nice natural flow to it, just with little expressions like that. So you can see that this student has the authorial intent sentence in there. His reputation as being the most informed and educated member of his family is at stake. They have a good blend of the implicit and the explicit, and the sentence constructs are really, really good. I want to point out something real quick here that my students also do. So note the beginning of this one, how it says blunt and self-effacing, and then let's look at number 3, calculative and pleading. So when my students are addressing the tone or the ethos, I have them make a duo, all right? They list it as a series of 2, blunt and self-effacing. So you start with 2 because texts are not monolithic. They have personality, they have complexity, they have layers to them. And I think when kids go uno, they're missing things. So I always have them work in duos, work in pairs when they're identifying the ethos and the tone. So that is exemplar number 2. Again, I want to talk about this art of implication. Right? You don't have to be explicit throughout the whole thing. And I know a lot of AP teachers are like, yes, but what if you get an inexperienced or novice reader come, the days that the exams are being graded and scored? Oftentimes readers want to see something explicit in the introductory paragraph so that the student is awarded the thesis. That's why I have them do a little bit of explication and a little bit of implication, because it makes the thesis really manifest in it. So let's see one more. Again, we're going to go 3 plus 1. Calculative and pleading, Woolf petitions Kafka to spell out the cryptic underpinnings of his famous work of prose. With his reputation on the line, Woolf puts all of his cards on the table. If Kafka holds his silence, the author will invariably be shunned by his family members. And there you can see another nice use of a colloquialism, put the cards on the table, right? So my students are in the habit of doing that. Matter of fact and pointedly direct, Woolf delineates what he's up against. A battle that is far worse than the brutalities of war. So that gets to the juxtaposition that the other ones were talking about. So it's implied. Having earned a doctorate degree, Woolf entreats Kafka to divulge his hidden meaning from one smart man to his equal. All right, and it's always 4 sentences. That's all you need for this. Vary those sentence constructs. Get the 3, get the 1, and you're off and running. You're absolutely going to get the thesis point if you do this. And out of the gate, I think kids come out with blazing speed. So hopefully you enjoyed that and can use it in your classroom. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to give me an email at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. I always respond to teachers and students. I love YouTube for that. I feel I'm very connected with teachers throughout the world and throughout the nation. And I like the collaborative aspect of this. Note that I do offer PD sessions throughout the calendar year. So I often travel to districts and often work in Zoom as well. So if you want me to work with your department and get you guys aligned or do a little skill building with exercises like this, I'm more than happy to. Just drop me an email at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. I also have a website, www.teachinghowtowrite.com, with a list of the PDs that I offer. And I also have a self-paced course that's very comprehensive, that goes over everything, like how I teach rhetorical analysis, literary analysis. I've done AP language and AP literature for over 20 years. And that self-paced course also goes over my Word Study Academy, my Nuance Academy, pretty thoroughly. So that about does it for us here. I will post more of these exercises in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. I use them all the time, and I get a lot of bang for my buck out of these quick ones. Take care.